What's up, everybody? My name's Adam McDormand, and this is Medium Quality. One of my favorite videos that I've ever done for this channel is this 20-minute long review of the Yes Remixes vinyl box set that Steven Wilson did. And in the years since I made that video, we moved into a new house, I've learned about speaker placement, I've even had a relatively substantial receiver upgrade kind of fall into my lap, and all of that has culminated in a listening situation that's unlocked new sonic possibilities for me, to the point where I've begun to better tell the difference between different pressings of different albums, and now all of a sudden it matters who's mastering a thing, especially if I want to get the most out of listening to a record on my system. And one of the names that keeps popping up as I'm reading about these things is Kevin Gray. Now, I was looking through his list of credits on Discogs.com, which is absolutely prolific. I mean, pages and pages of albums that he has been responsible for cutting the lacquers. And then I came across something. The 2016 remaster of Yes's Fragile. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do. I had to get myself a copy, and I needed to compare it to the 2018 Steven Wilson Remixes box set that I had spent all that time listening to a few years back. And that's exactly what I did. But before we get into the specifics of those differences, I think it's important that we take a step back and understand the process that yields two different versions of the same album 2 years apart. So if we're talking about the 2016 remaster, Kevin Gray would have had access to the original analog tapes that Eddie Offord mixed in 1971, and his task would have been to very lovingly and carefully translate the characteristics of that original mix, which would have been how the album was intended to sound, and translate that into a vinyl record. For the 2018 remix, Steven Wilson would have gone further back in the process. That is to say, he would have had access to the individual recorded performances and kind of rebuilt the album piece by piece digitally, and then rendered that out as a new mix of the original recordings, which then would have been mastered themselves by Chris Bellman. Now, the thing that makes this comparison perhaps more interesting than the ones that I did in that earlier review is that both Kevin Gray and Chris Bellman are really well known for making good masters of whatever source material that they're given. So in theory, that levels out all of the variables in this process and gives us two different versions of the same album. One very much a representation of the original analog mix from 71, and this very lovingly reconstructed digital mix from 2018. That's all well and good, but how do these things sound? Well, I started with the Kevin Gray cut, put it on the turntable, dropped the needle, side one, track one, roundabout. And I'm immediately struck by how beautiful the original mix by Eddie Offord actually is. And it's been treated exceptionally well in the mastering process by Kevin Gray. When I flip over to the Steven Wilson mix, I noticed that it's a little bit quieter. In fact, my instinct was to turn it up 2 or 3 decibels on my receiver. But what I noticed was that Bill Bruford's drums are hotter in the mix. It's almost a more modern approach to mixing where drums are much hotter in the mix, especially the kick drum. And it gives this song kind of a weird effect. The kick drum begins to sound a bit dull and flat because it was meant to sit a little further back in the mix. Both versions of Roundabout have a similarly wide soundstage with excellent separation of sound, but the Steven Wilson mix is slightly more analytical. It reveals some things that were previously buried in the mix. And of course, the trade-off there is that this microscopically more modern mix begins to reveal the limitations of the original recordings. For example, those Bill Bruford drums cutting through the mix in a way that they were never intended to. By the time I get to Long Distance Runaround, I'm noticing that the Kevin Gray cut has done such a good job of preserving the Eddie Offord original mix, and it's more cohesive, really just by degrees, right? Making it perhaps a bit, and I mean a tiny, tiny bit, more musical overall. On the other hand, this more modern mix by Steven Wilson treats the songs really, really well. The bass and drums are really, really big in the mix, as you would expect from a modern rock record. And I suspect that because Steven Wilson has so much experience going back and remixing these old classic progressive rock albums, that he's using some of his wizardry to get the guitars and the keys and the vocals to cut through and kind of sparkle on top of this really present bass and drums mix. One of the things I mentioned in the review of that box set is how the real standouts in this Steven Wilson remix are those interludes that come in between each of these massive progressive rock epic songs. And they've been treated with such care in the remixing process. They are by definition more simplistic than the big prog rock epics in this album, so the more modern, more analytical approach to mixing here actually benefits those songs. They benefit from being crystal clear. For example, the layers and layers of Chris Squire's bass stacked up in the Fish interlude is an absolute treat compared to any version of this song that I've ever heard before. So let's finish by comparing one of those big prog rock epics. The album ends with Heart of the Sunrise, and listening to the Kevin Gray cut, it's warm, it's musical, but it's clear and dynamic. The song in this release absolutely blew me away, and there for a minute, Heart of the Sunrise became my favorite song in the entire Yes discography. Now, part of that is due to the fact that I'd never listened to the song with proper speaker placement before, and hearing it as good as it can possibly sound just totally unlocked the grandeur, the ferocity of this song. And then jumping over and listening to the Steven Wilson mix, I noticed how extremely present it is, which was different and also really cool. Even listening to this entire massive song for a second time in a row, like this new mix, it kept me engaged the whole time. There were things that cut through the mix that are buried in the original mix, and overall, listening to this entire album twice, jumping back and forth between versions, ended up being a really delightful experience. Now, I got rid of my old beater copy of Fragile pretty much as soon as I posted that original box set review, and even though the Steven Wilson remix may not have been slavishly faithful to the original Eddie Offord mix from 1971, one could argue that neither was the $4 copy that I got at the back of a used bookstore circa 2010. And at the time, there was simply no contest between my beat-up old used copy and this dynamic Steven Wilson remix, beautifully mastered and pressed to vinyl. That calculation has shifted a bit for me now that I have a version of this album that, at least according to some guys on the Steve Hoffman forums, compares favorably to the much, much more expensive Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab pressing of Fragile. And ultimately, we come back to the question of which one? And the answer for me is both. I think it's safe to call the Kevin Gray cut the more essential of the two, and practically speaking, the only way to get the Steven Wilson mix on vinyl is to buy this massive box set, and that's getting really expensive at this point, though the 2016 vinyl release of this album is about to become increasingly difficult to come by, so you should get it while you can. In the absence of access to either vinyl copy of this album, there's always Spotify, where you can listen to either version of this album, and both of them are good. Both of them are interesting. Obviously, the definitive version of this album is always going to be that original 1971 Eddie Offord mix, preferably mastered well so that you get the characteristics of that mix preserved and elevated so that you can listen to how it was intended to sound by the people that were there in that moment, creating this wonderful, wonderful album. Anyways, that's going to do it for this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more, make sure you hit the subscribe button. And if you're really into what we're doing on this YouTube channel, I'm going to put a link in the description section below where you can get some really cool medium quality merch. Until next time, guys, keep spinning that good stuff. What a time to be alive.